Okay, so I'm going to speak about the HERCOG project, which is the other side of, or another dimension of this HERPRO project. Pilar has made my life very easy because she's really explained very clearly the sorry, I'm just struggling with this mouse today. Yeah. So I will first of all start by making some acknowledgement, because everything we have done in this project so far, and it's been a year already, it's been teamwork and it's been a lot of work. So here are the other members of the team: Rafael Alejo, Irene Castellano, who's on maternity leave. We have a HERCOG baby. Laura Filden, who's there, Marta Martin, and Alba Martin, who's very, very recently joined our team. I think it's just, yeah. So this is the outline of my talk. I will be just commenting on the theoretical framework, some of the objectives. I'll be giving you some ideas on the methodology, some results, and preliminary findings. So on the theoretical framework, I think it's just the. Have you got the pointer, if you don't mind, Marta, because I think it's just the batteries. Okay. So as is well known, figurative meanings in L2 learning are very important, and they have been recognized, and this is one of the main contributions from cognitive linguistics, because they are ubiquitous in language. Thank you. They are extensively employed from early childhood, and the misunderstanding or misuse of figurative language makes L2 learners be perceived as outsiders. This concept of metaphorical competence, which is a construct, has been examined from 3 decades, 4 decades, in fact, from different perspectives: from the perspective of psychology, from the perspective of linguistics, and from the perspective of applied linguistics. And in this sense, Graham Low's contribution is very important, because he defined metaphorical competence in 1988 in a very seminal article. He published that on teaching metaphor. And also our colleague Jeanette Littermore has also established the main components of this construct, which she relates with the originality of metaphor production, fluency of metaphor interpretation, ability to find meaning in metaphor, and speed in finding meaning. And there has been, again, seminal publications on this concept. So from the point of view of applied cognitive linguistics, and why is this important for second language learning, we have 2 very important ideas here. One was already established by Frankfurt in 2000. This idea that in terms of working with students and the influence of metaphorical competence in L2 learning is probably more productive to encourage learners to generate L2 metaphors. So this is the idea of instilling a metaphor awareness to organize the stream of figurative language they are exposed to. So finding ways of organizing that. And Fiona MacArthur also talks about this, power of metaphor, of figurative awareness, right, as the best ally for foreign language learners. Okay. So in our view, I like to talk more than the metaphorical competence. I think we have to have a more global view on the issue. So there's not only metaphors, but similes, personification. We have a recent article with Laura on personification published in the Journal of Pragmatics. Irony, metonymy also play an important role in this competence. So it's not just metaphorical, but figurative. And following MacArthur and Bors, we talk about awareness rather than competence itself, because competence has a very strong connotation in our field. And this is something we've discussed. We need to make ourselves understood and to use the appropriate precise terminology so that we can transmit our findings. So for us, figurative, Pilar was talking about communicative competence and lexical competence. For us, figurative awareness will be part of both lexical and pragmatic competencies. They both have play a very important role there, and subsumed with this major component, which is communicative competence. So there are some previous studies that have measured this metaphorical figurative competence in learners from 2 main perspectives. some of them have used naturalistic data. This is written assignment, writing compositions that learners write, okay? And some of them have used metaphor identification procedures like MIVU or VIP, vehicle identification procedure. And you have some studies there that have been with very important results. And also elicitation methods, which are the use of comprehension productive serves to elicit ideas. This is what I'm going to present partly later. They are closer to the psycholinguistic tradition and relate metaphorical language to other variables that have been measured in vocabulary studies. So they are very interesting in that sense. And you have some examples, and we will be mainly follow the ones that derived from O'Reilly PhD dissertation that have been written by him and in collaboration with Emma Marsden at the University of York. So we actually carried out a pilot study to pilot this heuristic section of O'Reilly metaphorical competence test with secondary school learners, because he was working with native speakers of English and Chinese secondary university students, right? As Pilar was saying, English as a foreign language is introduced earlier and is a lot more present in secondary school stage, in Spain also in primary and even pre-primary states. So we thought it was important to apply this to the main amount of learners we are working with. And this is our sample in the project as well. We're working with secondary school learners, 15, 16 years old, when they finished secondary education. So we piloted this test with 19 students. They were 15, 16 years old. They were clear learners, and the subjects they were doing in English were, apart from the EFL, maths and physical education. We use different instruments, the vocabulary levels test, the one Pilar was showing to you a minute ago, and we use both the 2,000 word and the academic one, both of them. And of course, the test from O'Reilly, this is the receptive part and the productive part. The scoring method we used was, for the PVLT, we consider correct, although the number of the word was not correct, or the tense, and we consider incorrect when they were using the incorrect part of the speech or they were missing letters. For the heuristics test in O'Reilly, he offers a rubric that I will be talking about later when I analyze the data from HERPRO. So what did we find in these data? We actually found moderate positive significant correlations between the ability to recognize these similes, because he was asking things like, a stomach functions like, a thunder sounds like, okay? So they could recognize these similes to perform heuristic functions, and they correlate with a significant positive correlation with the 2K PVLT and with the academic PVLT. This is the receptive part. However, the productive part didn't correlate with the academic PVLT. That was surprising, because we wanted, these clear learners are particularly exposed to this academic language. So it seemed to work in the receptive part of their production, but not in the productive part. So some conclusions from these pilot studies, this test is suitable for secondary education. In the reception, as I said, dimension, it correlates positively with validated tests. And in the productions, they require some adaptation. So what we proposed that was to use a wider sample with a greater number of students, to make it more inclusive, and to piloting it with other measures, exploring other dimensions, and using naturalistic data, so compositions, again, that have been used before in the literature. So this is how HERPRO came into our lives, as I explained before, right? Pilar and I had lots of discussions. I went to Logroño and we were talking about these things and how we were interested. She was particularly interested in lexical competence. We were here interested in metaphorical figurative competence. So we started this project, okay? She was talking about the objectives of the project. The one I'm concentrating on today is the third one, which is the production of metaphorical language and its relationship with the learner's creativity profile and their, metaphor production. So going back to the conclusions from our study, okay, from our pilot study, we had a much wider sample. From 19 students, we now have 434. Is more inclusive because we have L2 and also heritage learners, L3 learners. We piloted with other measures, the exploring cognitive dimensions. As I said, we are now exploring also the lexical and creativity profile of the learners. And in the case of the naturalistic data, we're using written compositions. We also have written production from these learners. So we can correlate all those dimensions. So some preliminary results, and this is just work in progress. And here where it says, suggestions are very welcome, and we have experts here in the field and from the audience as well. So just what we have done so far. So I'm just gonna briefly describe our sample. We have, as I said, 434 participants, 314 are L2 learners. Pilar was talking about that. Highly heterogeneous sample, from A1 to C1 level in English, from very competent speakers of Spanish to people who had just arrived from the countries. You know, some of them we have to actually discard them because they had two languages and Spanish was not one of them. So there were girls who were speaking French and Arab, and that was it, not even English. Okay, so we found that it is, as Pilar was emphasizing, and I think it's very important, an emerging reality in our classrooms that needs an educational approach and it needs educational measures. We managed to, because it was very difficult to actually have L3 heritage learners, they suddenly disappeared. We asked the teachers not to tell them that we were going to do the test, but somehow some of them found out and they didn't attend to the classes. That was they didn't attend the classes. They were very shy sometimes, but we have the opposite as well. Learners who were very, very high, with a very high level and with a very high profile and very willing to cooperate. So as I said, very heterogeneous sample. They were all from 15 to 16 years of age. We had some participants from 10 secondary schools, 5 in La Rioja and 5 in Extremadura. The data collection process was very intense, very interesting, and very rewarding and satisfying, I would like to say. Of course, we have to present all the research approach had to be approved by our ethics committees at both universities. We were given informed consents to the schools and to the individual participants. The data gathering took place between March and June 2024. It was mostly through an online application, and I would like to thank our IT technician from La Rioja, Felix, because he's made our life incredibly easier with this. He designed this application, so we, in all the vocabulary test that Pilar was presenting, we actually gathered the data online. And the students really enjoyed that. And they took it very serious and they were really focused on the tasks. And, of course, we have some creativity tests that had to be online and on paper, and the written compositions as well. And there was one school who didn't give consent for the application. So we have to use pen and paper with that school, which is very interesting because Rafa has already done some stats on that. So we'll be able to compare the differences. There's a very important number of students there. So we'll be able to compare the difference between collecting the data online and collecting the data through pen and paper. Well, this is our data. Pilar and I like to call this our gigantic Excel spreadsheet. As you can see, well, I don't know if you can see it very well, but all the variables are there. And we already had some results, some initial results, mathematical results that Felix managed to produce with the formula. So that was, as I said, a very important starting point. Relating to receptive metaphorical competence, I'm going to start talking about some quantitative results, very general findings, okay? We found what we were expecting, actually, and with what the literature has already proved in other types of texts. Moderate positive correlations between the receptive metaphorical competence and both the productive vocabulary level test and the English proficiency of the learners. So the higher level of English they have, the higher vocabulary they have, the more metaphors they produce, or vice versa, okay? So these variables are interrelated. And this is something it was not our aim, but there was also strong positive correlations between the learners' productive vocabulary test and their English proficiency. And we have, I think this is quite an innovative study because of the sample we have over 400 participants, and because of the educational level we are analyzing as well, secondary school students. Interestingly enough, when you compare the L2, the non-heritage, with the heritage learners, you can see that there are better results for the L2, the local learners, the non-heritage ones, in general English proficiency and productive vocabulary. That you see the differences there, but they are not differences in their receptive metaphorical competence. So when you have the data about how they understand these similes, they perform very similarly. So this is very important, and I think something to really analyze for the future and for its implications, because it means that they can access this metaphorical language, understand it, even though they seem to have a slightly lower vocabulary and general English level. Moving on to our productive metaphorical competence text, this is the data we gather. So these are the 6 items in our Riley test. So thunder sounds like a bomb, a big drum in the sky. You have very different responses here. Some of them are creative, some of them are literal, some of them are in Spanish, some of them are in English. So this is what we found. Clouds function like cotton candy, a perceptual metaphor. Shatters are relational metaphors. The heart functions like an engine. Iniesta en el medio campo repartiendo juego. This is a very famous Spanish footballer. So the heart functions like a footballer, very creative metaphors. The roots of a plant function like a pipe, like the veins, you know, like the hands, like las patas de una mesa, the table, right? So, you know, what did we do? First of all, applied O'Reilly's rubric, because he already provides us, and you know, in terms to replicate his findings, we wanted to use his rubric. So he gives 2 points to the response that forms a simile that suitably describes to a child what the item in question is, looks like, sounds like. 1 point when it forms a simile that somewhat describe to a child what the item in question is, looks, sounds, and 0 points, you know, when there's nothing there. So this is the stage we have followed from June till the end of the summer, okay? So first of all, well, we decided to use integrated reliability to analyze all this data, and there was a lot, with 6 raters. These are the members of the team. So we first of all did it individually, then in groups of 3. So we had 2 groups. And finally, Rafa and I decided that we needed to understand the frames that we're using in those similes to organize all that huge amount of data. So we used FrameNet. Well, this is actually, we are doing it at the moment. This is work in progress. So this is what we started from. This is the Excel sheet we had with all the responses with the rubric, and we were individually scoring. This is what in groups got to. So in the case of cloud functions, like we could see that some answers were related to batteries. Of course, some of them couldn't explain. There were literal, creative, literal, and motivated answers, and some domains or frames. We prefer to call them frames now, okay? And this is where we are at the moment, okay? This is what we are. We have managed to categorize all the responses for clouds in 5 frames, or the valid, or not motive. I'm not going to say valid because all the responses are valid. Motivated responses. So we have impact and friction frames. We have motion noise, like bouncing ball, bowling, collapsing with impact, the bang, the crash, the hit, the crickling, the heavy fall. The make notion, animals, you know, we have here humans, make notions, animals, or events. So we have all that represented. We have the noisemaker when the agent is always an object. So musical instruments, speakers, fireworks, cars make noise, and sound that do not denote an emission of production, but only the sound itself. So I think this is the what we've managed to do in our categorization so far. And well, these are our next steps, right? From now, we have luckily 2 years to finish this project. So there's a lot of work ahead, but you know, we have time to do it, I think. We need to finish the qualitative analysis of the productive metaphorical competence test, and then conduct the once we have all our responses rated and all the scoring done, we will conduct the quantitative analysis of the productive metaphorical test. We will be comparing the results with the receptive metaphorical competence test, the general English proficiency, the productive vocabulary, And then, of course, with our colleagues from La Rioja, with the learners' creative profile, HERLEX, and with the learners' lexical profile. So we're very much looking forward to see what we get from those results. And well, these are some references that I've used in this talk. And if you want to know more about these, on the 25th of October, we'll be having another international seminar, this time in La Rioja. So David O'Reilly will be there, and Mayana Cifra-Calan will be there as well, and the members of both teams, the HERLEX and the HERCOG team, and there will be more data and more results and more analysis to be presented there. So thank you very much for your attention, and any questions or comments are very welcome.
Okay, very good. So we have time for questions. Peter.
You need the mic, yes, for the audience, yeah.
I'm sorry. So this is fantastic and really interesting work. And I was wondering, how do you explain the kind of apparently the magic ability of the heritage learners to produce or to understand the metaphors in the same way as other speakers? Is it that they can fall back on the L1 knowledge for that? Is that how you would interpret it?
Yeah, some people talk about metaphorical competence in your native language and in your second languages or additional languages. I think that metaphorical competency is on a cognitive level, is in your mind. So, and I've worked with children, right, with very small children, with very young children. So I think this is a mental mechanism that is not specifically related to your linguistic proficiency in any language. So we can analyze, reason analogically and associative, and even, these speakers who speak many, and this is something we need to explore how they do that, but they understood the receptive metaphors, because especially on the receptive level, then we need to speak about production. And this is when they get penalized, when they produce conventional uses of metaphors that are instantiated very differently in different languages. But on the receptive level, they understand. No matter what language you speak, it's a mental mechanism that this is cognitive linguistics, what it postulates, and I believe that is a mental thing, and and you made use of your language, but it's a mental thing. So that's what I think. I don't know if.
Yeah, sorry if I can.
Of course.
Because there's also this interest in testing creativity, which doesn't rely so much on language. So we're going to have, we still don't have data, but that's going to be very interesting to compare the results with that test, because that's going to tell us whether there's something cognitive behind those results that are presented today.
Our colleague Almudena Fernández Fontecha from the University of La Rioja is the expert on creativity. She's done lots of research into this. It was just amazing because, they had some of the students couldn't write the composition in English because their English wasn't good enough. But there was this test with just pictures they have to draw, and it was amazing what they managed to produce in picture form, in pictorial form. So when they didn't have to use the language and they understood, what they have to do creatively, they really performed really well. So we are very much looking forward to work together with Almudena and compare our results with this creativity profile. Because maybe Jeanette says something about what she will, of course, say a lot about creativity this afternoon. But, from this more psycholinguistic point of view, is very interesting, very interesting. Frank? He needs the mic. Janet wants to say something. Okay.
Yeah, just really interesting. I love that thing about the pictures, and I was wondering if that might be a nice thing because I think one of the key things is kind of stimulating the cognitive mechanisms that lie behind metaphoric competence in both the L1 and the L2, and that's really nice. I like that idea of maybe starting with the pictures and then moving into using them as a springboard for language. Yeah, that's all I wanted to say. I think that's nice.
Thank you. We will see what Almudena has to say about that. And we've got this amount of, gigantic amount of data, but it will be really, really interesting to analyze. Thank you very much, Jeanette. Thank you. Frank.
Thanks, Anna. Fascinating talk. So O'Reilly, I think, developed his test of metaphorical properties for L1 use.
Both L1 and L2.
Because if you take a test as an L1 user, you understand all the prompts.
Mm-hmm.
You are not constrained by your proficiency in the language to also produce similes or metaphors.
Yeah.
In your case, you are using prompts in English.
Yep.
And you are asking them to use similes and metaphors or motivations for metaphors in English.
Or Spanish.
So I'm not so surprised that you're finding positive correlations between their vocabulary size and their English proficiency and their performance on the test.
Yeah.
Because some of the students may simply have felt constrained by their linguistic resources to actually, if they don't understand certain words in the prompt, then it's very difficult to use metaphor. If you have a certain metaphor in mind but you don't find the English words for it, then you're stuck too. And so to some extent, it might be interesting to apply the same battery of tests with the same participants, but in Spanish.
Right.
Just a suggestion.
Just to uncheck. Yeah, yeah.
Well,
I also
we allow-
wanted to, sorry, just a second question is, I don't know anything about creativity tests, but I do wonder to what extent creativity as a skill is stable.
Right.
I feel more creative after a glass of Rioja.
Yeah, that's something to think about and to ask Almudena, because she, I'm not an expert in the field of creativity, so we need to ask her. I like your suggestion about doing, and this is something we thought about. Yeah, it's gonna be difficult to do it with the same sample of participants, though. But yeah, maybe a small study with less, but it would be more easier to perform.
We allowed answers in Spanish.
Yes. Yeah.
So, and if they had any problem understanding, we translated for them. So,
But even so, I think that it would be,
true.
and we even suggested that they could use their first language, not necessarily Spanish. We suggested that if they wanted to use other languages, nobody did. Nobody did, but we said that. But I still think that even so, it would probably, I don't know, be different if it was performing their own one with a smaller sample of the students. But yeah, we tried to control for that with that's what, when we piloted the test, we were, for example, shatters was something that some of them needed an explanation, because they are more familiar with the term blind than shatter. So yeah, so some of them were asking, and we were walking and making sure they understood.
Maybe related to that, you can also comment on the problems related to the interpretation of the questions, because so we had these. What is the? What was the second question? No, we were
the cloud. The cloud.
Yeah. No. The cloud is. What was the second?
Thunder, cloud, stomach.
Stomach. Yeah.
Heart.
Because the question related to the stomach was related to the function.
Yeah.
And some of the answers were related to the appearance. So we had to decide whether some of the answers were really connected to the question or not.
There were, it's actually, the items themselves, this is something but Rafa is doing some stats on that as well. The prompts are different, because thunder sounds like, that's the only thing with sound, and the rest are things like function. And we hypothesized that their clue background may also influence their responses, because it's the stomach or the heart. So this is something that some of them just provided the answer they would be expected to produce at an exam, right? So, the heart pumps your, using metaphors, but probably they've learned as chunks from the clue exposure, okay? Pumps the blood in your body. So it was like not what we were expecting, because we were asking them to compare it and to explain it to a child, but what their teachers would be expecting from them. So that's something to take into account as well. And the roots of the plant was very, very interesting, because there were these two ideas: the absorption, and the anchoring to the So that was we've been enjoying a lot analyzing these answers. Yeah.
Okay. Any more questions online or here in the audience? No more
No more
questions?
questions?
Okay, so we can finish here.